We did it! We made it to the end of the series. While it was a short one, it still had a lot of content to cover. Let's see what we can find. All three books take place within about 2 years. The Hunger Games and Catching Fire are about 6 months apart, and Mockingjay and Catching Fire are almost immediate. It doesn't really give the reader or the protagonist much breathing room, especially since each book was released 1 year after another. Also, the world building remained consistent. The reader learned more about each district over time since the story didn't tell you right off the bat which district did what. If it did, I didn't notice. The world building didn't feel too overbearing or too little. It felt just right. We learned along with Katniss about each district since it was forbidden to travel to each district in this world. Also, one important thing is that each book referenced each other and it affected the characters involved, especially at the ending when everything has gone back to normal but our protagonists are still affected by what happened to them. You all noticed the common theme of survival. In each book, there is a moment where the main focus is to survive, whether it be in the arena or in the field of battle. Katniss had to survive many life or death situations that can't be easy on a teenager. After the first book, Katniss and the majority of the readers thought that she wouldn't be bothered. She'd live happily ever after in her own way. But no. She has to have one problem after another thrown at her. While that may be good for our protagonist to help them gain character development, it's too much if it happens rapid fire. Katniss did grow from her experience and found out more about herself, but the whole thing happened within the span of over a year. That's a long time to try to survive. Now, humanity is another one. This one is huge. The government in this world made the Hunger Games to punish the districts and entertain the capital citizens. To the capital, they're just watching another show on TV and placing bets on who's going to survive. To the districts, that's friends and family! Those are children! I can imagine this is what the gladiators were like back in the Roman times. And I mentioned in the first review about the conversation Katniss and Gale had where humanity can disappear. In Mockingjay and Catching Fire, Katniss talks about trying to justify her actions for killing another human being. She knows it isn't right. There's a scene in Mockingjay where Gale has no problem killing a bunch of soldiers the same way his father was killed, but Katniss insists on letting them live to bring District 2 to their side. You would expect her to just go in firing to kill all the soldiers once they came out, but she's actually trying to save them. She even saved Enobaria, a tribute from District 2, who tried to kill her. She didn't have to. She easily could have told Coin to only save Peeta. She understood that these people have families and people who care about them. Each book also had a focus on protecting others. In the first one, it was keeping Prim alive, then Peeta. In the second one, it was keeping Peeta alive. In the third one, it was keeping Katniss's friends and family alive. She lost the majority of her friends and family in that whole experience. This whole thing started because Katniss wanted to save Prim from going to the Hunger Games. But instead of dying in the Hunger Games, Prim was killed on the battlefield. What hurt was that at that moment, Katniss couldn't protect her. Katniss couldn't have done anything to change that. Life is like that too. Let's say you did everything in your power to prevent something from happening, but because of this, the same thing or something worse happened to you. Reality is unfair. Katniss couldn't protect everyone she loved. Also, this adventure, like many series as you'll notice, contains elements of the hero's journey. We have the main protagonist, who is called to adventure. In this case, Katniss was called to the Hunger Games. She has to learn how to survive with help from her mentor, Haymitch. Katniss had to go through a bunch of trials in order to reach the end of the quest. She also met up with two people who wanted to use her for their personal gain, Snow and Coin. She goes through a big mental change and eventually returns back home, but she will never be the same. I know I missed a lot of steps in there, but that's basically the gist of it. Alright, let's get to the relationship. It felt fake in the first book. Katniss was definitely playing it up for the crowd to survive, but she started to care about Peeta. Peeta's family cared nothing about him. He literally wouldn't have had anything to go back to if he survived. I mean, sure, his father did care a little, but his mother wasn't the nicest person. Peeta didn't want to win because the only thing he cared about was Katniss. Katniss knew this, but she still didn't want to kill him. Through this logic alone, she easily could have just killed him then and there. But they had been through so much together that it didn't feel right. In Catching Fire, while Katniss is still very unsure of her feelings, her actions show she really does care about Peeta, and that is confirmed in Mockingjay. We know how Katniss felt, but what about Peeta? That must have hurt hearing that the whole romance thing was just for pity and getting sponsors. It probably hurt even more when he had his memories tampered with and saw her for who she really was. In the end, he did come back to caring for her. It took me many years to realize this, but they complement each other. And that's just my opinion. You guys can think whatever you want. Alright, this is the big one. Control. Katniss was forced by the government to fight to the death against 23 other children, some of them her age or younger. The only reason she did it was to save Prim from having to do it. She didn't want to be part of their little game, and she made that very clear in 2 actions. 1, by covering Rue's body with flowers, and 2, the stunt with the berries. She knew it was unfair of the government to pit actual children against each other in a death battle. And it got worse later on when she was forced into the arena again. This time she showed her defiance by breaking the force field. Now, a lot of readers probably didn't think much about the rebellion and how they too could be controlling, but they were. It's literally why Katniss killed Coin. You can tell right off the bat that Coin wanted to be in charge, but Katniss didn't like that Coin was using her for propaganda purposes instead of her actual fighting skills. The excuse was, no, you're too valuable, you have to be the face of the rebellion. Coin was planning to kill her off anyways. Why wait? Now, let me share my 2 cents on what I think of the series as a whole. Part of me really wanted to believe the sequels weren't planned, but they were. Usually when a series is unplanned, the sequel is released years after the first book. While the first book did have a somewhat natural ending, there was still that question of, what will Katniss do? Plus, there was a conversation in the first book between Peeta and Katniss talking about how he wants to show the government that he's not some pawn in their games. Like I talked about in the analysis, that hit home for Katniss, and she wanted to make that absolutely clear in every situation where she felt like she was being used. Also, there was foreshadowing of what would happen in the next few books. One example I can think of is when Johanna was last seen in Catching Fire helping Katniss get the wire to water. We later learn in Mockingjay that Johanna was tortured by being soaked in water and then given electric shocks. It's little things like that that make me believe this series was planned, and surprisingly it works. I admit, I liked reading through the series again with a new lens. I'd recommend reading every single one if you can, although there may be a few parts where it's slow, it'll pick up. Well, what about you guys? What do you think of the series as a whole? You can get quite a bit out of 3 books. I know I'm not planning to read the prequel anytime soon, but if you guys really want me to, I'll look at it for a Masters of Literature video. I hope you had fun this series, September. I hope to see you again next year. Happy reading! Masters, you can't keep ignoring me. I'm part of you. I know you want to listen to me. It's been so very long. What do you want, Stresma?